Well, good afternoon, Knicks fans. I'm Allan Houston, and today we've got a great panel. So welcome. So we're going to be talking about the lasting legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today we celebrate his birthday, and what a great celebration it is. We wanted to commemorate the impact of Dr. King and discuss how his values and actions as a leader in the civil rights movement have had a lasting influence. So before we begin, let's meet our panelists. First up, joining us today, he enjoyed a 13-year NBA career, spending 8 memorable seasons with the Knicks, known for one of the most iconic plays in New York Knicks history, the dunk. And you know which dunk I'm talking about. Since retiring from the game, he brings the tenacity he brought to the court to philanthropy through his own foundation. And for the past 5 years, as a member of the board of directors of the Garden of Dreams Foundation, he has been involved with the foundation since its inception in 2008. Please welcome former Knicks guard, my brother, mentor, John Starks.
What's up, Al?
Guard Lounge.
How you doing?
Good, man. Good to see you.
Yes,
So next, he's one of the most iconic players in Knicks history. Played 13 years in the NBA, and his name lives in the rafters of Madison Square Garden. He's been very active in various community affairs and programs and has received many honors for his off-the-court community activities, including the Harlem Professionals Inspirational Award, Most Outstanding Model for American Youth, the YMCA Citizenship Award, and the Big Apple Sportsman of the Year Award. And he has 2 honorary doctorates, one from Manhattanville College and another from his alma mater, Winston-Salem State University. He's a member of the New York Knicks 1973 championship team, New York Knicks legend, Earl the Pearl Monroe. What's up, Earl?
How you doing, Allan? How you doing, man? You too, John. Nice to see you.
Yes. And finally, we are thrilled to be joined by a groundbreaking and historic woman, the first female majority leader of the New York State Senate in its long history. In 2012, she became the first woman and African-American woman to lead a New York State legislative conference. And in 2019, she became the first female Senate majority leader in New York history. Under Stewart-Cousins' leadership, New York State has passed a variety of progressive laws across the board, issues like climate change, voting rights, immigration reform, justice reform, gender equality, gun control, marijuana decriminalization, you name it, the list goes on. Welcome, New York State Senate Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be there with icons and you know, I don't know how I got the privilege to be part of this, but thank you, Knicks, for doing what you continue to do. Good to see you.
It's our honor, it's our privilege to be with you. I'm really looking forward, especially on a day like today, to hear, you know, some of your insight. So let's get started. So many of us are familiar with Dr. King's and his devoted life, and he fought for equality and equity for all Black Americans through his leadership of the civil rights movement. And from the historic 1963 March on Washington, where he gave the infamous "I Have a Dream" address, to the Montgomery bus boycott, to the Selma to Montgomery march, to his letter from the Birmingham jail manifesto, he inspired millions with his fight against economic and social injustices experienced by America's Black and brown communities. So, Senator Cousins, let's start with you. What was your experience learning about Dr. King growing up, and what did his impact have on your life? And I would love all of you to answer this question.
Yeah, well, Allan, you know, I actually was 18 when Dr. King was killed. So my understanding of Dr. King growing up in the North was Dr. King was leading a civil rights movement that would impact all of us, that talked about unity, that talked about justice, that talked about peace. But the focal point was when we were watching the hoses and the dogs and everything at aimed at people down south. So I grew up in New York City, and we always thought, oh well, that's them. This was happening to them, but we doing all okay here. And so it was frightening as an African American, young person to see it. It was like almost another world that this was happening. And I did not realize, and I'm sure we'll get into this as we go on, how the segregation in the North was really impacting our lives as well. So it allowed us to look at what was happening, to fight and know that injustice anywhere was injustice everywhere, and know that Black people were not being treated fairly and with respect. And then later to take a look at what was happening everywhere, even here in the North, and it impacted our lives greatly. And it was traumatizing, but it's something I'll never, ever, ever, stop fighting for.
Wow. Earl?
Well, excuse me. I grew up pretty much in the time that Senator Stewart-Cousins did. And I'm from Philadelphia, so I was looking at it on TV as well, with the dogs and the fire hoses and things of that nature. And I didn't know if, how much that would impact me. And then I went to school down in North Carolina, and I saw it firsthand, exactly what it was all about. Dr. Martin Luther King was really a hero of mine. I can remember before I went to college, I was supposed to go to the March on Washington, and I was working during that time, and decided that I was going to just hooky from work and hooky from the march as well. And I've always regretted that. And, all the times that I was able to see him, something was happening and we weren't able to get to see him, and then he passed away. He has just been a big landmark in my whole thinking about growing up in the 50s and 60s, and really in terms of how I feel, my attitudes toward race and things today was really derived from that era. And it continues to, kind of frustrate me, to tell you the truth. But still in all, my life has been very much impacted by the fact that I knew of Dr. Martin Luther King. I was around when he was around, and I lamented when he passed away.
John, what impact did he have on your life?
Well, Dr. King, for me personally, obviously, I didn't grow up during that time. I was born in 1965, and when all this was going on. And so what you learn about Dr. King is whether it was in textbooks or whether it was what you saw on TV and all the images that was transpiring back during that time, and the impact that he made on people, especially in sports, and bringing guys together to help fight this cause. It was like disheartening just to see that because I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and obviously we know about the race riots back in 1921, and it was talked about, but I really didn't experience it from a standpoint of what I saw on TV. And as a young kid and you seeing this, it's like, wow, this is going on in America. You know what I mean? You thought America was supposed to be somewhere it was freedom and it's supposed to be safe for all, and you still seeing, all these things going on. A man that's putting his life on the line to fight for others, and that more of an impact than anything. It taught you to stand up for what you believe in and fight for the cause. My mother, my grandmother always taught us that, and his impact for me, and the courage that he had to stand in the face of death, in a sense. Every time he stepped out his house, every time he go to fight for social issues, his life was put at risk. And he had no fear because he believed in the cause and know that this was going to make America a better place.
Yeah. Senator Stewart-Cousins, you grew up in New York, and you were the daughter of a World War II veteran who served in a segregated army. Dr. King speaks a lot about the segregation and the impact of integration. How did you see Dr. King's work impact your community?
Well, again, that's exactly right. And I have an opportunity when I speak to people and I speak about my dad, like you said, World War II veterans, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. When he came back, he did not get to take advantage of the GI Bill like his white counterparts did. So we grew up in public housing. That's where Black GIs or GIs who were white, who couldn't afford, or whatever the reason to buy a home, we came to the project. And I did not realize that the very impact of the segregation of the military, the segregation in the United States, led to us being segregated in public housing, because the GI Bill did allow for home ownership, but not for Black soldiers. The banks did, allow for a variety of forgivenesses and a lot of mortgage-free for white soldiers, not for Black soldiers. So the very existence of where we were was a result of that segregation. And I always talk about my mom, who typed 100 words a minute. She was growing up in Harlem, and she would look at other women, white women, who were, she would call it hunting and pecking, looking on the keyboard trying to find what letter is what. They'd be working in corporations, but because of the segregation, my mother was not able to work in a corporation. So she got her start in civil service. So his fighting against segregation was what, again, in New York, I was living as a result of the policies, but it was just subtler in the city, in the North, than it was in the South. And it manifested in very different ways. But it certainly impacted my community, and again, continues, as we unravel, and we'll talk about today's events, because we're still kind of unraveling, what that segregation, what racism, what the historic, racism has done all over this country.
Yes, we have to touch on that at some point. And Earl, you were named Rookie of the Year in 1968, the day prior to Dr. King's assassination. How did that impact you and your teammates at that point?
Well, that was news to me. I didn't know I was named Rookie of the Year the day before. But, that was after the season, obviously, in 1968 for us. And then we came back in 68, 69 season in the latter part of the year. For me, his passing, again, was quite traumatic for me. In the sense that I never got a chance to really see him or visit him or talk to him. For me, I don't know what it was for the rest of my teammates, but for me, for that year, that next year, I decided that I would, pay homage to him, and I wore a black patch on my uniform for every game. And then for every game that we had, I would read passages of his speeches before the game. It's a book by Jerome Bennett called This Manner of Man, and it listed all these speeches, and I would read the speech before every game, and it was a way to get me just more ready to play and to go out and do battle, and remembering who he was and what he stood for. When you lay down your life and you lay down your life for everyone, it says something about that manner of man. He was, the type of person who had humility. He has a type of person who cared about his fellow man. And it wasn't just, it wasn't just the black, it were poor whites and other people that benefited from the fact that this man went out and laid out his life. So, that again, was part of how I grew up in the so-called civil rights era. My red, black, and green sweatbands, all those type of things, helped me identify more and made me, I guess, a little more vigilant in Baltimore, at least, that I might not have been if I was somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, as you say that, I'm trying to picture like what that would have been like as a player. And it seems to me like Dr. King gave your generation a sense of dignity, of hope. When you walk outside that basketball court, you weren't receiving that just as a human being, even though people were cheering for you. And I think, our generation, when we look at what we're able to kind of do through social media, right? And you look at what happened even with the voting energy that was put into by, our young athletes in the NBA and WNBA. It just seems to me that our generation is seemingly able to use a voice, and I'm extremely proud of them. There's going to be backlash, but I guess I would ask you, John, and even Senator, in today's current climate, how have you been able to use your voice to shed light on topics that matter to you as a former athlete?
Well, it's kind of like what you just said. Most athletes nowadays understand their worth in society, that they do have a voice, that they do have a bigger platform, obviously, than what we had when we played, and they're using it for good. Me personally, all I can do is just talk about what's going on, especially to people in my circle, and hopefully that spreads out to people in their circle and continue to spread the word. Social injustice is not going to be tolerated. It can't be tolerated. I think, we live in America, and it's supposed to be a land of free speech and a land of freedom for all. And to be able to, have a understanding of what you can do in life without having consequences to it. I think that for most people, as a black man, and I talk to my kids about this, you should feel free to go out and do whatever you want to do, whatever you dream that you want to do, have that opportunity, and don't be stranglehold by other people's opinions of you. And I think if we can get past all what's going on in this climate, which is crazy for what we've been seeing so far, and hopefully a change is coming, that we can move forward and be inclusive in the game plan, so to speak. And so we just have to continue to keep pushing forward, continue to, when things happen, be able to speak up. And like you said, I'm proud of these young athletes. They don't care. You know what I mean? It's not about the money. It's about, because they have family members that still struggling. You just can't look at, okay, I'm doing okay, and people around them is doing bad, and it's because of what's going on in society. You have to be able to stand up for people that can't fight for themselves. And it's good to see that these guys understand that.
Yeah, I remember when we were supposed to go to have training camp in Charleston, South Carolina, and the state capitol held the Confederate flag on top of the Capitol, and we chose not to. We chose not to go there for training camp. And I remember that decision that we made as a team, and I'm glad we did, and we got the support of the Knicks, of the organization, to do that. And I just want to say this real quick, and then we got a video that we have to show from a fan. But with athletes making significantly a lot more money, you would think that because of that value that they have from the money they make, you would think that society would view them differently. But I think the reason a lot of our athletes feel so strongly is because as much money and as much accolades and much appreciation that this generation of athletes get from fans and media, you still are Black. You still are brown. and it's seeing that conflict is it cuts right to your soul when you realize that reality and it's seen society. So with that being said, we want to take a quick break, and we have a video from one of our Knicks fans and community leaders. So let's take a look.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Smith. I'm 18 and from Harlem, and I'm currently attending Howard University thanks to the Garden of Dreams Scholarship. My question for you all is, with so many voices and opinions flying around today, how do you manage to maintain your own and fight for what you believe in? Thank you.
Great question. Senator Stewart-Cousins, I think that's great for you to kick us off there.
Yeah, I was excited to see that young man who was going to Howard. I'm going to give a shout out to my grandson, Kendall, born today, Dr. King's birthday, and also trying to decide whether he's going to go to Howard. So happy that these young voices are not taking for granted where they are and understanding more what they could do. I mean, how I use my voice is I have a legislative pedestal. I'm able to make laws that impact the people of New York State. If we are doing it well enough, we also, because New York is a focal point of the world in many ways, when we pass something here, it can be picked up all over the country. So people pay attention to New York. And that's why I was very proud to be able to, during the summer of protest with my counterpart in the Assembly, Speaker Hasty, we were able to push forward police reforms, banning the chokehold and making sure that disciplinary records of police officers were made available. We were able to do things like change the laws around bail. We did criminal justice reform and speedy trial. We have been able to do sensible gun laws to make sure that, especially the voices of our young people all over are asking us to do something about gun violence. So we make laws for that, whether it's the environment. So I have an obligation as somebody who can direct policy in New York State to be cognizant of the courage and the sacrifice of those who have come before and had not the opportunity to actually change policy and to step up and do what I know is right, not only, again, for communities of color, but when we do the right thing by everyone benefits.
Mm-hmm. Dr. King, he once said that faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. I'd love to hear, Earl, John, when we think about leadership, do you think leaders are born? What makes a great leader, and why is great leadership so difficult?
I'll start off, Jai.
Okay.
I think, I don't know if leaders are born. I think leaders are a result of circumstance in a lot of instances. And certainly, and the compassion that you have for what is going on around you gets you to start thinking about being a leader. I mean, when you think about trying to diversify and be inclusive and all those things like that, those things make people, feel like they're being treated fairly. It gives them dignity. It ensures that everybody, feels as though they're valued and, they have a sense of belonging. And the confidence that you get for them, permeates, all around you. And to be a leader is, from what I gather, is that some leaders, you don't have to say anything. You lead by example. You're a person that, you live right, you do right, you're being seen in the right light. And that's the example. It's like, they used to say, okay, we're going to these neighborhoods, we're going to do that. Well, that's great to go in those neighborhoods when it's prepared for you to go. But if you're in those neighborhoods already and people see you, it really means a lot much more because they understand that you're a part of what they are and that you care about them.
No, I agree wholeheartedly, Earl, with that. I think leaders are made in the sense of, you know, what they went through growing up. I think things that you see or things that you are taught is what makes you into a good leader. And you can lead by example, just what Earl was talking about. Sometimes it's inherited inside of you, just because it's just in you. There's no other way to put it. You know, the best player on the court is not always the leader of the team. And we know that as players. And so it can be that guy that's coming off the bench that's always in guys' face, like a Draymond Green. You know what I mean? When you look at Golden State, I know we're Knicks, but I'm just using this as an example. So everybody calm down. Everybody talking about, you know, Steph, Clay and those guys, but Draymond is the leader of that team. You know what I mean? So it's just inside of you. It's just guys that just got that quality to speak up when nobody else want to speak up. For whatever reason, I always had that inside of me. You know what I mean? And that was taught by my mother, my grandmother, to speak up when you see things that's not right. And I had an uncle that was like that. And so I kind of learned from them on how to be a leader and how to conduct your life. And so I would say just you inherit it and people teach you how to be a leader.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've learned too that it is something that you can learn. So much of it is who you learn from. You know, as you said, we saw it, and I saw it growing up. Saw it when I got here. You know, from you and Patrick and people, and I think that leadership can be very lonely because you have to be willing to step out and do things that other people and say things that other people aren't willing to do. That doesn't mean you have to be the most vocal, like you said, or outgoing, but you certainly have to be willing to be consistent with your example and your authenticity, and people will see that. I think leaders have to be authentic. I think that's what made Dr. King so special, is that he put a bold vision in front of people, but he lived it. It wasn't he was just speaking about a bold vision about what we can be. He lived it every day, and people saw it. And he was also very bright. You know, leaders, I think you have to have a strong knowledge base on what you're doing. So I want this to lead to the next question for the senator as it relates to leadership. Think about our young people in their role, what you are inspiring our young people to do, Senator. What our young professionals, how can we create spaces for them, for the younger generation to lead and to make an impact in their communities?
Well, you know, I just wanted to say also about that leadership question that, you know, Dr. King, when he started out, he wasn't starting out to lead this movement at all. You know, circumstances kind of started twirling around, and then they said, okay, he'd be the guy that would, you know, be the best suited to be the face of this Montgomery bus boycott. So, I mean, he didn't expect, obviously he was young pastor, and so, but he never expected to become the Dr. King that we are still you know, admiring and emulating today. So I think that's important for young people to know that, you know, a lot of times you don't even, but it's the circumstances, I think, as Earl and John, and even you said, circumstances sometimes mold. And for somebody like me growing up, when I grew up as a woman, as a Black woman, nobody expected me to be a leader. Nobody expected, you know, that I was going to, you know, head up anything, frankly. And that expectation wasn't there in me either, but circumstances happened, and so things unfolded. So for young people, you know, they are in a much different situation. The world is much, much smaller. People are more interconnected. we're not as ignorant or as oblivious to what is going on and how things impact our lives, whether it's who's leading us, whether it's the environment, whether it's safety in our schools, whether we're getting the education. These kids are absolutely more tuned in. So for any of us to give a platform for a child, like I have a youth advisory council where I'm listening to 50 kids every month. You know, they have their own committees. They're helping me craft legislation. They're weighing in on things. They're calling people in to talk to them about things, engage them, mentor them, you know, listen to them, encourage them to vote if they can, as soon as they are eligible, because even now, more than I understood when I was growing up, who leads in government, who creates policy matters. So mentoring, hiring kids, you know, listening to them and following their lead is the best way you can really amplify their voices. They have leadership roles that we never could have dreamt.
Yeah. I'm really glad you picked up on that and you weighed in on that idea that circumstances really can create opportunities. You know, it's the same in sports and life. It's why you work so hard to be prepared, right? Not just as a player, but as a person, right? As a person, you have to be prepared because you never know what role you might have to step into and you get called into. So I'm glad you brought that point up, and it's very important for young people to know that about Dr. King. There's one question. We have another video coming in, but before we get to that question, I would like all of us to think to if we have a message, if we could share a message to today's youth about the impact MLK, Dr. King had on our generation, like what would that message be to today's youth about the impact? Go you. Let's start with you.
Good question.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, you know, first of all, you have to look around and see, you know, what your circumstances are. You have to have some type of insight to know and to be about today. I mean, if you look at today if you were in the moon and if you look down at the earth today and you saw what was going on here in the United States, you might not want to come. But there's a lot that's involved in this whole thing. And I think it's important for the youth of the day because we have so many different ways that we can understand who we are and where we came from. You know, we got Google, we could go back and see, because you don't really understand where you're going until you know where you came from. And so it's important that, you know, we talk about Dr. King here, but this is one time a year. You know, what's happening to the rest of the year? And if you were Dr. King, you know, one of the great things that he did was he was inclusive. You know, it wasn't all about, the movement wasn't all about him. You know, there are many other people that were involved in the movement that we don't even, you know, we don't recognize, but they were just as important as Dr. King in terms of moving forward. And I think it's important to try and fixate ourselves on what other people were involved, how their movement brought us to where we are today and where we are today. And it's just a matter, you know, information is out there. And that's the name of the game, trying to find that information.
Yeah, I think if you look back at some of those clips back during the 60s and the marches and what have you, it wasn't just Black folks marching, it was white folks marching too. And because they saw a need, that injustice was being done, you know, with Black folks. And so, and you look at today's climate, you see the same thing, but at a grander scale of all people, you know, fighting for justice. I think it's important that, you know, people understand that, you know, we all in this together. If this United States is going to be united, that we have to be united as one. And we can't just look at one group of people fighting for justice for themselves. We need everybody fighting for everybody, and if we're gonna move forward. And I think the young folks nowadays have a bigger platform. You know, this right here, this right here is their platform.
Yeah.
And you know, what I'm so proud of, and within my own family, you know, I watch my daughter. She's 20 years old. And Allan, you know Tiara, she is like, she's a tiger, you know, and I'm so proud of her and my oldest daughter, Chelsea, because they stand up when things are not right. And, you know, as a parent, you worry about that, you know what I mean? Because you worry about the backlash. But I understand that they fighting for something, and they fighting for something that they believe in. So you have to let them go out there and do their thing. And so young folks, if I could say anything, you know, use your voice. It's there. You know, you don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be a senator. You don't have to be a teacher. You know, you can go out in the community and make a bigger impact than any of us can, because you in there. You know what I mean? So definitely, you know, if you see something wrong, step up, speak on it, and find a solution in order to make a difference.
Senator Cousins.
You know, I was also thinking about how I spent most of the summer, like so many of you all probably did, at these Black Lives Matter rallies. You know, I represent Westchester County in my role, and I was amazed at the amount of rallies, you know, Black Lives Matter rally in very white communities, you know, led by a lot of different people. I went to one that was a Say Her Name rally that was organized by a 12-year-old, you know, young girl. So what you are seeing in this generation of kids coming up is extraordinary. And right now, I mean, just because this is Dr. King, and like Earl said, you know, sometimes we forget. You know, we celebrate it on the weekend, and then we go on with our lives. But I don't believe that is going to happen, because one of the things when we were going through COVID and looking at the unrest in the streets after the murder of George Floyd is that, you know, people were kind of going through this Dr. King weekend as, okay, this is the weekend that I do this or that. But it was very clear that what Dr. King fought for and died for is still an issue, you know. So we could have all tried to pretend, you know, especially with President Obama and this and that, but no. And we have been able to see that there is still justice that needs to be served. There is equality that needs to be fought for, and there is a reason to continue to push for, you know, the beloved community and the equality that Dr. King talked about. So I hope this King weekend will just, again, be a revitalization in face of everything that we're seeing, to remind us that yeah, you know, it's over 50 years, but we are not there yet.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. So well said. So we it's amazing that, you know, we probably have about, you know, 15 more minutes. We're coming to I guess the fourth quarter of this, but we have a video from another fan, and we're going to play that now.
Hi, my name is Bjorn Etienne, and I'm a high school senior from the Bronx. My question is for Allan Houston and John Starks. How has the role of Black athletes using their voice and platforms influenced current movements or helped shape conversations around equality?
John, you want to start? Or?
Yeah. Well, like we talked about earlier, you know, athletes, especially Black athletes, understand what this fight is about. And they bold with it, to say the least. You know what I mean? They're not sugarcoating anything. You know, you look at the playoffs in the bubble where Black Lives Matter was on the court, and all the, you know, sayings was on the back of the jersey, and people was like, they shouldn't do that, they shouldn't do this, this and that. And players wasn't standing for it. You know what I mean? They like, no, this need to be in your face. You know what I mean? This needs to be recognized as that we in a fight right now. You know, we in a fight still for equality. You know, this is over 50 years ago when Dr. Martin Luther King was fighting for equality for all. And now it's here again. And so Black athletes understand that they have a voice. Is don't shut up and shut up and just dribble. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's not the case now. And these guys understand that, hey, we're leaders. You know what I mean? And we have to fight for people, like I said before, can't fight for themselves. And that's very important. You know what I mean? Because not only is America looking at them, but obviously the African-American community is looking at us too, you know, as athletes. You know, you have a platform. Are you going to say something? And these guys are saying something in a big way. And so that makes me so proud to see that, you know, that these guys are not concerned about themselves, but they're concerned about others. And you go all the way back to when Kareem and Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali and those guys had that panel. You know what I mean? They probably got more abuse back then, you know, for them stepping up than these guys nowadays. But it won't be stopped. You know what I mean? And that's good. You know, I'm glad that these guys won't let their voices be drowned out by all the rhetoric that you hear, what you see on the internet, you know, on social media and what have you. You know what I mean? Because that can play on your mind and you can get discouraged by that. But these guys are not getting discouraged by that. And so I'm happy to see, and it's not just Black athletes, it's white athletes, it's all kinds of athletes that's in this fight. You know what I mean? Who would think it would get down to soccer? You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's good to see that the athletes in general understand that, hey, we have to I play alongside this guy right here and he's not feeling comfortable. You know what I mean? So I got to be a part of that. And it's good to see that, you know, white athletes are standing up too and being a part of this, because like I say, it's going to take all in order to make a big difference. And when you have guys that you fight and you sweat with and you do all kinds of things with, that they believe in your fight and they're willing to stand beside you, that makes a big difference.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that has always bothered me is when you go out and when someone sees you as a tall Black man, if they don't know who I am, they automatically assume you must be a basketball player. And the reason that has always bothered me is because if you go back to what Black people, the worth of a Black person in this country was always limited to entertainment or free labor. And so I think the reason I bring that up is because I think a lot of athletes and people who have platforms are realizing now that I have a platform and I can use a voice. I can own my own voice, own my own media, and I can use that. But at the end of the day, certain people are all they're going to see me as they're only going to see my skin. They're only going to see my worth in a certain way, like shut up and dribble. That was one of the most demeaning things that happened, because what that said to LeBron James or anyone is, you're not worth that. You're only worth entertaining me. That's basically what they were saying. So I think athletes are coming to the realization that, you know, if you're going to value me as a performer, then have we never been valued as a human being with dignity? And that's what Dr. King was always saying, even towards the end, is it's about equality, it's about economics, it's about opportunity. And people are our athletes are starting to see that it is our responsibility to make sure that these things are known, to educate. And the whole voting initiative was so powerful because of that. So great question, young man. And I'm so grateful that that was something, you know, that we could talk about. You know, Senator Stewart-Cousins, I want to ask you, what are some of the ways that you see communities in New York uniting, especially during, you know, COVID and within the context of the activism of 2020, even in the light of what we saw, just a week ago.
Yeah. Well, what I am seeing is an unprecedented level of activism, an unprecedented level of collaboration. A lot of times, especially in my world, you'd have this group fighting for this and this group, they're all like fighting for the same things, but they all are having different agendas about how they can actually achieve these goals. But because there's so much hurt and there's so much pain, and there's so much understanding that, if I'm not doing okay, or even if I am doing okay, there's a whole lot of people who aren't. I've seen just an unprecedented amount of collaboration. So as I said, not only was it the different rallies and the way people came together, Black, white, brown, Asian, everybody, saying, look, we're not going to rest till justice is really served, but also in terms of food and trying to help people who were left out in terms of any kinds of relief. I mean, I see it in every level that people are looking at what Dr. King called the beloved community and really finding a way to make it so. And so they're coming to me with, this is how we have economic justice. This is how we fund our schools. This is how we make sure everybody's got health care. This is how, and some of these things, are difficult, but the vision for healing and uplifting community is a bold vision, and more people are grasping the idea that we must not take this crisis and not see it also as an opportunity to start again reinforcing the things that Dr. King talked about and what we all know would make a better society.
Yeah. I think this is for all of us and you on here. One of our Knicks fans wants to know, how can leaders across all industries continue to emulate Dr. King's message of equality? Maybe we'll start with you, Earl. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess, first of all, we could take one of Dr. King's sayings and remember that the time, the time is always right to do what is right. Mm-hmm. And we really have to think in terms of that, in terms of the things that what is actually right. Obviously the things that we've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks, right or wrong, they're happening. And we need to try and rectify that in some way. So leaders, industries and whatnot need to have people who are cognizant of what the right way to go and what the right thing to do. I get kind of welled up in all this here because, I've been around here so long, seeing this whole thing, from back in the days, trying to get people registered to vote back in the 60s, going into rural areas of North Carolina, seeing how people were living, and all the way up till today. And like the senator said, those things are still prevalent, even after all these years. And there has to be some line drawn across the board. In terms of what I see it, in terms of communication, in terms of coming together to have a strategic plan. We had so many Black Lives Matter things across the country, but it was back in the day. We had SNCC, we had the Minutemen, we had all these other different organizations, all of them supposedly going in one direction, but all of them different and going in different directions. It has to be something to solidify the efforts and toward moving forward. And hopefully, somewhere along the line, somebody will kind of get that together. Maybe we'll get another Dr. Martin Luther King again, because we certainly need him.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think, John? What do you think, all industries. You've been in a lot of different industries. You know, you've been in philanthropy, you've been in business, you've been in sports, you've been in media. You know, what do you think about what can leaders do to emulate this message of equality?
Well, obviously, it's economic equality is what we're talking about, and I think hiring practices have to be changed. We've been fighting about that for God knows how long, and I think that needs to definitely be on corporations and their hiring practices. I think from a standpoint of the quality of people should be put in place. You don't have to look at their skin color and say, okay, this person don't fit that mold because of the skin color. You know, you have to throw that at the board. You know, you have to look at, that person's intelligence. Is that person truly qualified to be in that role? If that person is qualified to be in that role, then why not hire? You know what I mean? And so I think, obviously, put money back within the community that you receive money from, I think is a big plus that can help change these communities around. You know, I play a lot of golf, and you watch the Tour Championship for Allan knows the Tour Championship for non-golfers is held every year at the end of the year of the golf season, the FedEx Cup down in Atlanta, and I forgot Mr. Cousins. I'm just gonna call him Mr. Cousins. I don't want to say Kirk Cousins, but that's in football. But Mr. Cousins invested back in the low income area around Eastlake. And it just blew me away when you give people opportunities. My mother used to talk about that all the time. You give a person an opportunity, that person's gonna run with it. You give that person the tools to work with, that person's gonna run with it. And she used to always talk about that. And this man, out of the kindness of his heart, within that community that was low income community, and I'm not sure if everybody's seen that, look it up, changed that whole community around. He has a charter school down there that 100% graduation, 100% go to college within that community. And that's a man that's in position, that has the resources, that saw that he could make a difference. And he's not of my skin color. He's not of your skin color, Earl. None of our skin color. This was a white gentleman that saw a need and an opportunity to make a change. And you look that up, it was, I felt incredibly proud that this man took the time and understand that he could make a difference. And it wasn't a person of his skin color. And that told me that change, if you have it in your heart, no matter what your skin color is, you can make a difference in people's lives. And I think that's what all corporations need to look at. You can make a difference in these low income areas and just give people a chance and an opportunity to make something of their lives. You don't have to continue to take. You know what I mean? You don't have to continue to do that, but you can make a difference in people's lives. And I think corporations need to really look at that.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, we have a video before. I want to make sure that we give, Senator Stewart-Cousins a chance to say a couple more things before we finish. But so we're going to play one more video, and we are almost at the 2-minute mark, 2-minute drill. We have one more video.
I'm Gene Jacques. I've been a Knicks season ticket holder for 5 years. I believe one of Dr. King's key principles is doing for others. With all that's recently transpired in our country, I've committed myself to starting a nonprofit looking to focus on middle school and high school age kids in underserved communities here in the city. So I'm wondering if you have any advice or know of any resources that might be helpful to an average person looking to give back and make a difference. Thank you.
Well, I think you know, the Garden of Dreams is a wonderful resource. You know, John is on the board. We've all done great work with the Garden of Dreams. So, I mean, there's the wonderful thing about, you know, Madison Square Garden, the Garden of Dreams, is that that's really what it's about. It's about using the platform to provide these resources to connect exactly what he was talking about. So appreciate that ask. And in closure, we have to. I really wanted to hear your context, you know, Senator, on this. I guess with this historic win in Georgia by the Democratic Senate, and how that impacted you with maybe, you know, Stacey Abrams, and then what do you see now? I mean, we're approaching something new. We don't know what it is. I just have to, you know, really ask you, as someone who has committed their life work to this democratic process, and we know that part of the civil rights, one of the major victories was voting rights. And just, you know, I don't really know the exact question, but I just would love to hear your commentary and what your feelings on that are.
This could not be a better time to celebrate Dr. King's legacy, because again, when you think about how he led marches along with the late Congressman John Lewis across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and people were met with whips and dogs and so on, all about voting, and telling people that if they were only able to exercise their rights to vote, that they would vote for governments that would give them opportunity and respect and justice. That was what that was all about. And over the years, you know, I haven't been in, you know, I've been in the political game now since the 90s, but for a very, very long time, you hear people like, oh, my vote don't count. Oh, why do I care? You know, I mean, you're talking to people and you're just kind of begging them. Well, people died, and somehow people did not seem to be able to connect those dots until now. Because in this past 4 years, I don't care who you were on the planet, you began to understand that what you did as it related to elections mattered. Elections matter, voting matters, leadership matters. And now we don't have to die to vote. We don't have to run up across too much. However, there are still, just like I was saying at the beginning, you know, sometimes it's out there real clear what you're up against, and sometimes it's very, very subtle. So the things that, you know, and I went through, you know, voter suppression right here in New York, you know, when I've been through this, and we make legislation to correct that. What Stacey and others did in Georgia was amazing. And now you have two new senators, and we have a new president, in large part because of the motivation and activation and understanding of the vote of Black people and people of color and allies who understood how important it was to show up. And so this election in Georgia not only gave us two new Democrats, but one on this Dr. King weekend is the senior pastor of Dr. King's church, Everly Baptist Church. So, I mean, it's an amazing, symbolic, and important milestone. It will also make our own New York U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer the leader of the Senate, which means that there will be leadership that is in line with leadership right here in New York. So I believe that you know, everybody's connected the dots. Don't get lazy. Don't sit back, because as Dr. King said, you know, this change does not roll on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. We have to continue to struggle.
Yes.
Powerful.
You want to finish with something, John?
No, I was just saying that's powerful. You know,
Yeah.
we are at that stage right now, you know, where we was fighting to get voting rights. And now, you know, big fight that went down in the Capitol, you know, was about votes. And, you know, and just like Senator Cousins said, you know, it just don't stop right here. You know, your vote do count. You know what I mean? As much as people want to say it don't, it do count. And it was obvious for those who don't even watch, you know, the news and what have you, but you had to be in this fight in order to get, you know, where we at today.
Earl, you have any last thoughts?
No, it's just, this is the dawning of a new age. Let's take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you so much, you know, Senator. You dropped the mic for us, so I appreciate you. You closed it out. You hit the game winner for us. I you would. I just didn't want to fumble it. I just want to make sure I gave it to you. You made the right pass, and I thank you guys so much. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for being open and honest today. I've learned a lot. You know, we my former colleagues and teammates, we talk about basketball a lot, but this is above and beyond the game of basketball. It's a game of life. And I think Dr. King's message was one of unity, one of equality. No matter what your political views or whatever your stances are, we can all agree that what he fought for was just the basic human worth and decency of a human being. And this process we've been doing now gave credence to that. So just want to thank you, and talking about the importance of that leadership, and that we need to model it. We need to model it in our everyday lives. So on behalf of the Knicks, I want to thank you, Senator. Thank you, Earl. Thank you, John. Thank you, all fans and supporters. And let's go Knicks and get a win tonight. God bless you. Happy Dr. King Day.
Happy King Day.
Very happy King Day.